Wait. Why is it doing that?
Just mute your mic.
Check 1 2.
Oh yeah, totally. I know exactly.
All right, I think we're live now. Good evening and welcome to the Danvers Planning Board meeting of November 14th, 2023. Before we start, Tori Adler, a member of the board, would like to make a quick statement just in response to what happened at our last meeting. We had a disappointing and rather unfortunate incident that happened during the meeting, actually, and Tori is going to chime in. Tori?
This board's October 24th meeting was interrupted by an online participant sharing a message of anti-Semitic and anti-Israel hate speech. We would like to thank DCAT for their quick action in removing that participant. This board condemns the message that was shared and reminds the public that these meetings are a place for civil public discourse. Hate has no home in Danvers.
Thank you, Tori. So tonight, we are going to have the staff, town staff, planning staff, Brian and Josh, talk again about multifamily zoning. So for the MBTA communities. So the first item on the agenda is the feedback session regarding multifamily zoning requirements for MBTA communities. New Section 3A of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A. We aim to gather feedback from the public regarding the requirements of the for MBTA communities and associated zoning amendments for the upcoming special town meeting. So right now, I'll turn it over to Josh and Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So this is going to look shockingly familiar for some of you who have came to the first session in August. There are a few updates, and they are important. So I'm going to go through kind of quick run through of what we did for some who couldn't come to the first meeting. So we're going to go through the purpose of the state legislation, what happens if we don't comply. I'm going to go through the proposed district location and and the actual changes to the bylaw. We'll have some feedback from you folks. I'll talk about next steps real quick, and then that'll round out the session. It seemed like the last time it worked best to keep most of the questions towards the end. I will go through the first several slides a little quicker than I did the first time, but I'll talk about the new changes that actually came out 9 days after our first session. So there were updates once in the summer, and then we had our session. We made changes to the bylaw that we thought would comply. And then 9 days after we had our first session of August 1st, we had another round of edits that needed to occur. So again, the purpose of the new legislation from the state, this is not a reasoning of why Danvers is doing it. This is the state's stated purpose, was to address the housing crisis, as Massachusetts has amongst the highest, fastest growing home prices and rents in the country. These rising costs increase pressure for individuals and families and decrease health. The idea is, of the purpose of this law is to try to create more units that have better access to work, services, schools, restaurants, and parks by building housing in walkable neighborhoods. This was also a goal of the Downtown Danvers Zoning Initiative in 2020. Okay. So the legislation encourages MBTA communities, of which we are what's called an adjacent community, to adopt zoning districts where multifamily units, multifamily is described or defined as 3+ units. It has to be permitted as of right in an area of concentrated development. So this is based on the need by creating a total number of about 200,000 units by 2030 in the Boston metro region. So what if we don't comply with this new section 3A? There has, from the state attorney general, there has been threats of possible housing discrimination lawsuits against specific towns that don't want to comply. More important for us at the moment is that we wouldn't be eligible for a whole host of different types of funding, most notably the MassWorks and the Community One-Stop application. So what types of funding are this for? This is for creating complete streets design implementation or corridor studies, business improvement districts, master plans, of which we need one, transit-oriented development plans. We don't really have a lot of transit. Some people want to change that in the form of some type of a bus. Intersection safety improvements. There's probably tons of intersections around town that people know of that are just that could be benefited from a little more comfortability. So these are all things, grants that we can apply for anywhere from $20,000 to $4 million. We did apply for a transportation master plan grant for $75,000 and then $35,000 for a downtown mobility plan for a total of $110K. We found out that we did not receive funding for either of those. they're not calling it an exit interview, but it's like an exit interview process in terms of what we did wrong or what we could do in the future to try to get that. That was certainly a loss for the department and the town, and we really want to get to the bottom of that. Like I said, we're now looking for other opportunities as well, but we want to figure out if we have a good chance at this next round, which is 6 months beyond now. A lot of the time they're like, there wasn't enough funding, but you were really close, you should really apply for this next round. Sometimes it's that direct. So we'll see how that goes. So the law says that we must zone for 10% of our total year-round housing units. In Danvers, we have about 11,760. So we have to zone for, that means permit, in a place with a density of 15 units per acre, roughly 10%, so about 1,100 units. So 1,100 units don't have to get built. That's just the maximum that would be allowed, or the minimum that would be allowed by right in a given area. So Danvers, like I said, is in an adjacent community because we don't have any transit, but adjacent communities to us do have mass transit, most notably Salem and Beverly. So if transit existed, we would actually need to zone for double the amount. So Salem and Beverly and these other communities that have commuter rail, they would have to zone for 20% of their total number of units. So it's a big jump. So the other requirement, it has to be at least 50 acres. However, you can see if you make the acreage bigger, you'll be able to get the units per acre down. If you have a very small area, it's going to be much more dense. So that's just the nature of that. So most communities are not doing the minimum 50 because it's quite dense at 50 acres. So because we don't have transit or near a train, it has to be in an area of concentrated development like Danvers Town Center. So town meeting adopted the Danvers Town Center and High Street zoning districts in 2020 with the MBTA communities, this law, the subsection to 3A. That requirement top of mind. So this was written at the time. My predecessor, most of the people on this board, but not all, or some of these board members, 3 years ago in 2020, wrote the downtown zoning trying to comply with the MBTA. At the time, it was compliant. The actual density numbers came out in the regulations. So it complied with the law at the time of passage at town meeting in 2020. The regs is where they're regulating exactly what is happening here. So that's where the actual density numbers and the compliance model and all this work over the past 2 years at the state level is forcing us to comply with. So just to be clear, it seems we were compliant with the law always from the beginning. We had an area of concentrated development allowing a certain amount of higher density. The number wasn't given. So, but now with the regs changing in the past 2 years or being created, the law was created with no regulations, so no one knew the densities. So where we are, sorry, I'm just moving something here. In order to do the entirety of downtown, in order to keep the density as close to 15 units per acre as possible, we wanted to use the entire downtown. So that actually includes I
have a pointer. Oh, you need a pointer? You need a pointer?
Yeah, it was here.
Tonight, you was it there tonight?
It was here 20 minutes ago. So this is the Maple Square, the Maple Square district is the blue area, which is currently having vertical construction right now. That's being built. That's not going to get any bigger than it currently is. But the idea is we're doing the entirety of downtown. In August 1st, we were contemplating not incorporating this, but we found that it's already what's been built there would be compliant with the bylaw. It actually makes sense. It's part of downtown from the beginning. It also allows us to kind of lower the density in other places to make the whole thing a little bit bigger. And it also makes sense to have the overlay over the entire downtown. It really didn't make a ton of sense. It didn't make a ton of sense to only do it everywhere but the 40R. Also, a previous version of the regulations wouldn't allow you to count the 40R. So there's been a lot of ups and downs for 3 years. Anyway, we have the total acreage of each portion. So the green portion, which is the High Street area, which is the area that we're actually looking to transform the most in terms of there's not really a lot of mixed use there. There's not a lot of residential there. And that's an area that's actually the largest area, which is the area in green towards the right side of the screen. That's 31 acres. The next is the red area, the downtown core, which is 23 acres. The orange is 20, and the blue area, which I said is pretty much already fully developed, is 11 acres. So in order to get 15 units per acre, you can't just allow a certain density. There's other things at play. You have to park it. You have to be able to put 1 or 2 spaces in there. There's a height limit. So it's not like the compliance model, it basically checks our zoning to see that based upon everything that's in the zoning, so based on the setbacks that are in zoning, based upon the height, the floor to area ratio, all the math that's involved in determining what can actually be built, it turns out that if we just had a minimum of 15 units per acre, you actually can't get to 15 units per acre because of other open space requirements we have and these types of things. So the only way to actually get to 15 units per acre is through these 4 densities: 20 units per acre, 16 units per acre, 16 units per acre, and 26. I'm going to go through that a little bit more on the next screen. the idea is that this is going to be very hard, I know, at town meeting to be able to kind of tease a lot of this out, because everyone keeps saying, well, look, it's 15 units per acre. Why do we have to do all of this? So I understand that there's going to have to be potentially some more and different types of education during that process, because it's confusing. But I'm sure there'll be some questions on that when we get there at the end. Okay, so this is the main part of the change that we're doing. There are some other changes that I'm going to go through as well that are required from the law. But the main things that we're doing are changing the densities that are allowed by right and the densities, some densities that are allowed by special permit. So the first thing that we have to change in the zoning is the definition of what a multifamily building is. We say multifamily building is 4 or more dwelling units. So that has to change to 3. That's part of the definition of what a multifamily is, according to the change in 40A 3A. The other is that in the downtown core, instead of not being able to build any multifamily at all, this is going to have to go to 16. And then if it's in a mixed-use building, you could go to 20. The one main thing that we had heard from the August 1st feedback session was that it seemed to make the most sense to try to incentivize more mixed-use buildings and to try to allow higher density if you put commercial on the first floor rather than have residential only. So this is in response to that. We agree with it completely. Think it makes sense because we can no longer require commercial on the first floor. That's another one of the changes that I'm going to go through, but I'm just going to focus on the numbers right now. So the numbers, again, it's going up in every place where there's a red box. That number needs to be changed to the green number. So the biggest change is actually in where the 40R is. So it is not going to probably produce any more units than what's there. But that's the largest change in the Maple Square overlay district. You were originally allowed to do 20 by right and 36 by special permit. None of the special permit densities are changing. So the maximum of anything is never changing. It's only the minimums of what you're allowed to do that are changing. And so you can see here it's modestly going up in these other places of the High Street mixed-use corridor. It's going up a difference of 4 units per acre. That's a difference of a normal project of a difference of 1 unit because it's about a third of an acre, quarter of an acre for a standard parcel downtown. So you're talking about a difference in here specifically. You're talking about a difference of a unit in terms of what they would be allowed. So we're not talking about major changes in terms of the density. They got very, very close when the densities were originally done 3 years ago with no numbers to work on other than economic feasibility numbers. So again, the maximum density here is not changing. So this is kind of just reiterating what I just said about really what's going on here. A typical lot downtown is about a third of an acre. So if using, most of the areas that are lower here are around 12 units per acre, which are too low. We're getting up to actually 15 units per acre. So on a third of an acre, it's basically going from a 4-unit project to potentially a 5-unit project, which would be allowed by right. So this is just the math kind of just showing that when it comes down to it, this is not a small change. Anyone would consider that a tweak to the zoning in terms of allowing 1 more unit in a building. So these are the other necessary changes after the 3rd round of regulations came out in mid-August that we've had to make in order to comply. So limiting the bedroom count or limiting the dwelling size or any other density limitations like 15 units per acre. Basically, 15 units per acre is the only density thing that can be kind of enumerated in the bylaw. So you can't regulate by bedroom count. You can't regulate by dwelling size. That's building code. So it's all just building code applies, which I believe, I think you need at least, I'm not 100% here. I want to say it's about 200 square feet for the building code in terms of for one occupant. Meaning that's the minimum that the building code allows. So it's basically saying building code, whatever is happening in the building code still stands, but the bylaw cannot regulate bedroom at all. The other is this pedestrian frontage zone. So this was something that came about in the zoning that basically forced commercial on the first floor. Everyone kind of agreed with this. This was not like a large push to anybody, really. Everyone kind of saw that as a benefit. The law doesn't allow us to regulate the ground floor like that. So what we've decided to do is just allow you to go higher density if you do put mixed use on. So that essentially allowed us to say, well, the anything that you're going to do mixed use, maybe you're allowed maybe 18 units per acre, but that allowed the residential piece to stay at 15. So the whole entire district has to be at 15 units per acre. But you can dial up and dial down certain types of uses so that it makes more sense for town. So I think that's what we've done here with that change. The third major change, is parking used to be based upon bedroom count and bedroom count alone. Now it's based on bedroom. It's still based on bedroom count, but it makes it more financially possible for all of this to happen. So 1.5 spaces per unit for two bedroom units. That's not changing. That was what's currently on the books right now. Is if you have a 2-bedroom, you have to do 1.5 spaces per unit, assuming that some people have 2 cars and some people have 1 car. Now, and then you used to be able to need 2 spaces for anything of 3+. Now it's basically 1.5 spaces for 2+, and 1 for studios and 1 bedrooms. So it's basically the only real change here is that a 3-bedroom will now require a 1.5 instead of a 2. That's really the only change. And I'm not saying that that's light or that that's a nothing. That's a change. That's a real change. But basically what we found with the compliance model at some level was that we were probably a little overparked in a lot of places where you couldn't actually achieve the density we needed because we were potentially overparked. I might stop there just as these 3 things. There's a few more slides, but I think now might be a good time to kind of talk about kind of these 3 major buckets of changes. Some of them are very small, but they're 3 different separate buckets. They're not large, and then kind of the numbers, because when it comes down to it, that's it. That's what I'm talking about tonight. That's what's happening at town meeting related to the MBT3A. It's basically just these numbers, and then and then these 3 changes. I have that in Word form. Those are going to be up on the website. Everyone will be able to look at the track changes of what's currently on the books and what these changes show. So if you want to open up the floor to questions now, please, sir.
If you would just approach the mic and identify yourself for the audience that's watching online, thank you.
Simple, quick one. Bill Bates, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. How do you do a half a parking spot?
This is a very common question: is how does that work? So it's a requirement for the number of spaces. So if you have a 20-unit building that you're trying to park and you need to do a space and a half, that would be 30 spaces. Sorry, if you're doing 20 spots, you're doing 30 spaces. If there's a half a space, it goes up. What that assumes is that some people are a 2-car family and some people are a 1-car family. That's the only way that works out. When you buy this unit or rent this unit, that's part of the deal. You get one space or two spaces. It's possible to uncouple, in all of these buildings, to uncouple the parking from the unit. So if someone doesn't have it, they don't need parking, they can like sell their space to someone else in the complex. So there's a lot of different ways to deal with that. But the way is, it's not a half a spot, it's a number of spots, and it's a whole number of spots. It's just showing, some people might have two cars, some might have one.
Brian, how do you factor in visitor parking on that?
Say again, I'm sorry?
Visitor parking?
Visitor park. So there's a number of visitor spots that are usually required as well. Also, I mean, most of any types of new units that are happening downtown, the people that are going to put in the types of money to build this, whether it's 2 or 3 units or whether it's 100 units, they're going to be marketing to a specific type of person. Depending upon what they can do on the site, if they can we're not preventing someone from putting 2 spaces. We're not preventing anybody from putting 2 spaces per unit. There is no maximum. You could put as much as you want. Not that we want to see that, but I mean, there's nothing preventing that.
But in your example of 20 one-bedroom units, 30 spaces, do we add on to that a certain number of visitor spots?
I certainly would. I would say that that's just the residential portion, and but if they're already, from what I understand, there's also there's other provisions for visitor parking. Is that?
So that will be provided in the bylaw that we're going to vote on, or I mean, how in practice would we suggest it or require it?
Well, so that's part. So that's part of from now until February for us to tinker with and get right. This is not to say that this is over and done with. The idea is that we are going towards town meeting. We're trying to get as much feedback as possible to make this. If you would like us to ensure some type of reasonable visitor parking on top of the residential parking, we can easily do that.
What do we require now, I guess, in
There's-
like,
There's not specific language
There-
explicitly for visitor parking as we speak right now. It's sort of just broken down by the residential.
It's broken down by bedroom.
The residential component is right, the per bedroom or per unit, and then the commercial, it's either square footage or number of seats in a restaurant. So visitors, as it is right now, there's just not language. That's sort of, lack of a better term, you could probably say it better, but like it's kind of baked in, right, to the overall, like, when you're saying the 30 for that whole project, that example that we were just describing, I guess it is with the idea that several of the people in that apartment building would only have one car. So organically, 2 to 4 of those spaces just organically would be visitor. So I don't know if Brian.
well, I would think if you're buying a unit, you're going to want to, if you're buying a unit, you're going to have, spots 1 and 2, or, so we're not going to have, so if it's an apartment, I can understand that we're not going to have assigned spots maybe, or how do we, so using the example of 20 units, and they're all, 2-bedroom units.
Sure.
So
That would be 30.
Are we
Yeah,
gonna
that would be 30
require-
spots.
are we going to ask for more, though, for visitor spots?
I think you could, to be honest. I think it depends exactly where it is. The dreaded word of there's actually plenty of parking downtown. Half the people are like, yep, that makes sense. And then half the people are like, no, that's not true at all. So the idea is that I think if it's near several municipal lots, would it need to have, it maybe needs to have less. I think the idea is it needs to be mentioned for sure. It needs to be talked about. Whether there's a specific requirement, we can come up with something reasonable to bounce off anybody.
Well, how does the state want us to do it, or how do other towns do it? I understand what you're saying, when we have the public lots downtown.
It's
but do we
usually-
have a
it's-
set formula that we're going to require.
It's usually left up to the developer to figure it out market-wise, meaning that like I'm not going to be able to sell X if it doesn't have 2 spaces, for example, or it's not going to have at least, I would say every single development I've seen in a decade, there's always dedicated visitor spots, and there's no, come to think, I don't think there was, I don't think there were bylaws on the books related to visitor space for residential. It was just kind of, they provided it because they know that they needed it to provide it to make their project marketable.
Yeah. Like operationally or from a functional standpoint, the property owner, by the second or third or fourth unit, towards the end, they know I only, if I only have 4 units left, but I have like 6 parking spaces, or, you're just not going to lease, or you're not going to assign. You're going to try and keep a couple just organically open.
Well, I think that the trend is, if you're trying to attract people that are going to use the rail trail and reduce down from a couple having 1 car, again, that's kind of the model that we're trying to keep everyone using downtown, using the services downtown, and opt to downsizing of 1 car, but then they might have kids and grandkids and maybe a kid staying with them, so you need to provide for some spaces. That's why, do we bake in 10% visitor parking, or, what's reasonable? If we're gonna do the legislation, we might as well, it seemed to me, I'd want some guidance and know what's allowed and what's not allowed, without scaring developers away and making it harder, but.
I mean, there's always reasonable numbers that we could find, but again, I think I would say that overnight, there should be plenty of parking downtown. If that's the concern, if you're talking about residential units downtown, I don't see how there's not plenty. And maybe you do need to walk 100 seconds. Maybe it is hard for the person with a mobility issue. Maybe it's hard for the 4-year-old kid who's 10 o'clock at night and you're trying to get him up. But like, for most people, it's going to be kind of like, well, if you want to live downtown, you can have 1 or 2 cars, and that's how it's working.
Okay. Questions from the audience? Mr. Bradstreet, I think I saw you first. I just called on someone, ma'am.
Oh.
Hold on 1 second. We'll have you come up in a second. You just have to identify yourself and speak through the mic so the audience can hear you.
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. Would it be a benefit to this development if the town lots downtown were turned into multi-level parking? So we could go up with the parking as opposed to, I'm being facetious, as opposed to trying to spread it out, go up. Because some of the buildings downtown want to be developed. They can't go out, they have to go up. Why don't we make the parking go up? Just a thought.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked about that a little bit before, just the cost of doing that. Should that be borne by the developer or the town? And to build something high, you have to have ramps and you need a lot of space, which Brian can comment on that, probably. Engineering-wise.
The cost is not my problem, it's the developer's problem. Sorry.
Right. Ma'am, you had a question, miss?
Lois McKenzie, Precinct 3, Town Meeting Member. The last part, the parking, is this not mandated by the state now? Isn't that what you said they were changing to? 1.5? No? That's how I understood it.
So that's all. So. This is what the proposal is. This is what we plan to do. This is actually already on the books. Right now, this is what it is. 1 space per unit for a studio or 1 bedroom. That's what it is right now. That's not changing. It used to be 1.5 spaces per unit for 2 bedrooms and 2 spaces for 3 bedrooms. Instead, it's 1.5 for 2 and 3, and it's for everything above 2 plus. Please, that's why you're here.
I just feel, as somebody who grew up in this town, that you're cutting it down to 1.5 spaces. you're going to have everybody parking on the streets, and we're going to end up having a city look, which is not what most people want in the town of Danvers. I know I've talked to other people in my precinct, and one question that was brought up is, why do we have to do all this? We don't have the T in our town, other than maybe bus service. And is it that bad to stay a small town? You know? It's a question.
Yeah, so this was a decision 3 years ago. Well, it was a decision by the select board currently. I mean, I don't want you to think that it's me saying that it, or that it's me, or that it's, we're here to do a job. The job is comply with this law, and we are doing our very best to do that.
Did you give back the money?
What money? We didn't, we did not get the 110 that we asked for. Not a bad.
Mr.
not a bad
Zubrick, you had a
point.
question?
He's gone. Yep.
I have attended Mark Zubrick, 9 Glendale Drive in Danvers, down in a little alcove, out of the way. You want? No, that's okay. Leave it there. I don't care about that. I have a comment and some questions because I sat through the last presentation that was made, and I got disgusted with what was going on. But that's me. The reason we're doing this is because of a legal dictate from the state of Massachusetts. My first question here is, what does this mean to Danvers? And you've explained that, and it doesn't seem to have that big of an effect because we pre-planned this in the last 3 years ago. Now, we're being hung up by parking. We were hung up at parking at the time when we passed this zoning, because at that time there wasn't enough parking for the residents that were going to be living there anyway. And there were some provisions made to use the Cherry Street Fish Market parking lot as an overflow. And that, I don't think that's right. The question that I have is, where is the parking for those 1.5 vehicles per unit going to be located on those third-acre lots that we have devised in our zoning? So that's one question. The next question is, the comments that were made just now is what I wrote down here. Are we trying to become Rantoul Street in Beverly? Is that what we're doing? We already passed that zoning, and that zoning was limited to the height and the density at that time.
No, the height's not changing.
I'm sorry?
The height is not changing.
Oh, no, I didn't say the height was changing, but I'm just saying that we already went through all of this.
Rantoul Street is 7 stories. This is not Rantoul Street.
Rantoul Street is a lot more what's coming here.
No,
Parking,
not exactly.
I'm sorry?
Not exactly.
Well, not exactly, but it can be.
No, it can't be. It can't be more than 45 feet.
Well, we're
not
already
7 stories.
changing the laws.
We've already changed the law.
Right now
We've already
because of
changed the law.
state legislation.
We've already changed it. It was already voted on. We're tweaking it by this meeting. We're tweaking it to make it comply due to some recent changes. We've already passed it. The town's already approved it unanimously.
And that's what I think.
Unanimously.
We went through this heartache at that time, and we did a lot of discussion at that time. And it did pass. That's fine. The question I have here, the final question is, what are the unintended consequences? And what we're finding out right now is parking is going to be one of them by adopting this density and the changes that are coming. So those are my questions, and my biggest question is, where are the 1.5 parking spots for each unit going to be located currently, under the current zoning?
So spaces for vehicles downtown can either be located underground at about 75,000 to 100,000 per space for construction costs. It could be on the surface, but generally, like you said, third of an acre, it's pretty tough. So we actually do manage some shared parking situations where they go through where an applicant would go through the planning board, which has happened in the past, where there are parking lots that are shared by both residents and businesses for mixed use that are technically off-site. Some of them are on-site, but yeah, it's tight. I'm not going to say it's not, but it's basically in 3 places: underground, on the site, or just off-site. In terms of unintended consequences, there's nothing really on the tip of my tongue. Honestly, I think any unintended consequences, you can always say under all zoning that it's not going to be exactly what you had envisioned, because everyone has a different vision of what really is there. So there's inevitably people that are going to be upset. In terms of unintended, I mean, some people want to see more life in downtown, more people, more things. Some people like the sidewalks being rolled up at 8 o'clock on a Friday. That's an inevitable friction that will exist forever. So we're not gonna, make everybody happy. What, again, I said, what Josh in here and the team and the board are here to do is to, finish what essentially that was started by complying with this law.
The reason, according to the documentation that I've been able to find, is that we're doing this under the threat of legal action by the state. The thing is, what are we losing by not implementing this particular piece of legislation onto our residents? Well, what are we gaining too?
That's actually a very good question. So the start of this was prior to 2020, long before the current Attorney General, previous Attorney General at that time, ever even thought about trying to exercise some type of power over communities related to this law. So it was done because people of Danvers wanted to have, again, more life, more residential units in downtown. That was what started it. In terms of what would we be losing? A large opportunity to have, again, a whole bunch of people, looking like this. So this is from the 40s. Pretty much every picture that I do see you, Bill. Pretty much every picture that I've found of the downtown that just look awesome and just amazing, and it's generational. It doesn't matter how old you are. You look at these pictures and it's like, these are great. We should have more people downtown. We should have more people, we should have more events, we should do more things downtown. Like, this is not my opinion. It's not my opinion. This is what people tell me. It's also the number one thing that came out of the Strategic Danvers public process, was that people want to see, more than schools, by the way, was people want to see more investment and care into the downtown. So that's what we'd be losing, I think, that large opportunity here. I mean, he's been waiting.
Mr. Bradstreet?
Again, Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I think I know the answer to one of my questions, but I do have a question. Can town parking lots be used by the developer as their parking spots? When they're gonna, if they need 3 parking spots, they don't have the room, well, you can park in the town parking lot. That's a question. The other is, to me, a common sense, don't ask for or request money from the state or the feds. It comes with unknown consequences. If we can't do it, don't do it. Don't look for help from the state or the feds. It's the comment I think that was made. We're the government. We're here to help you. The worst words you can expect or like to hear.
I think you're out of order.
Thank you.
So as to the first part of that question, can you repeat the first part of that? Because the second part, I'm not going to entertain that.
There's a question about, can a developer say, I can give you 3 parking spots, but there's 2 that you can use in the town
Yeah,
parking?
normally all your parking has to be on site.
Okay.
Unless, and again, there are some scenarios where shared parking, the Cherry Street lot, remember the town and local businesses contributed to, building and repaving that lot, and it's worked pretty well, I believe, as providing a space for the local businesses that work adjacent to it, in addition to overflow parking for residents and people in the area. So could something be, I don't think you could necessarily, well, you may have to work that out before they come before us, with a shared parking plan, potentially. I don't know, I could ask you on that, Brian, if you would comment on that, or Josh. Maybe if you know of any other newer construction projects, but typically you got to have all your parking on site.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it would kind of be a multi-stepped, unknown process of putting some type of shared parking mitigation plan that would essentially be passed by you, but you have no power to go over that town. Like I would imagine you would still need to get select board approval to do anything related to the town lot. Plus, I don't think it's probably not. It just gets thorny really quickly, right? So I mean, I would say to your point, yes, it's possible, but like unpalatable.
There are a couple instances in town where it's happened, but historically, but I think the idea is that that's not where we would probably want to go.
If you don't have enough parking on your site, you're going to have to reduce the number of units, typically.
Right.
You got to meet the math.
Or honestly, the only other way is some like extremely large public benefit, like that some development could prove. Like, I don't know what that is. I'm just saying that has been known, that does happen. You're giving a whole bunch of public benefits, then maybe you get 2 spots out of the deal. Not money, I mean like public benefit, like I don't know, something related to open space or something.
Public use of the building.
Something, yeah.
For,
a 24/7 restroom,
yeah,
or
or something.
something. Yeah. I'm not advocating that. I'm just, yeah.
All right, there's a question, gentleman in the green hat.
I apologize for the comment about grant money.
Thank you. As a town, obviously, towns get money from the state and the federal government. It's the way it works.
Good evening. Alan McCarriston, Precinct 7. I've got a few comments regarding that 1.5 parking space. I just want to put a rhetorical question out there. How many people do you think have one car for a husband and wife or what have you? A married couple, everybody's commuting. So I don't think the 1.5 actually works. I'll just leave it at that. I think the 2, we've compromised, or someone's compromised. We had 1.5 parking spaces per a two-bedroom unit. The 1.5 parking spaces was applied to the three-bedroom, was it? So we've reduced the number of bedrooms, but we didn't increase. You've got a three-bedroom apartment has 1.5. So now we have a two-bedroom still at 1.5. But chances are there's two working people in today's day and age, and they're probably commuting. I understand that people want to go downtown and socialize and go to the restaurants, but that's probably after their workday. So I think we have to reconsider the two spaces. And I understand visitors, but the visitors comes to another problem. Someone, hey, come on over to the apartment tonight or our home, and we'll have pizza. Well, there's no place, and we've visited that parking, that additional parking for visitors. So that's one thing. I think we need to elevate that number to 2, but that's my opinion. Next, we're talking about a third of an acre, and the third of an acre is 4 units max. It was 4.5. So does that mean that it's going to be 5? Because I'd love to have that potential in the stock market. You know, it just doesn't make sense. If it's 4.65, is it 5 units, or is it sticking at 4 units? Why does that? You mentioned the 3.45 and then 4.65. It can go up to 5 units. Why is that the case?
It doesn't have to.
Okay. So we're talking about a third of an acre, and we're talking about parking on that and trying to allocate that space. There might be a solution over in Salem, heading out to the Willows, because of the floodplain issues out there. There's parking underneath the home, so there's a common area to go in, and they park under the house, and then they have the housing above. But I suppose that could lead into a height restriction. So, but I'm thinking that could be a possible solution to getting 2 spaces for each apartment, so that's 8 spaces on a third of an acre to get the 4.
If you look at the Daniela's restaurant on Holton Street,
Yes.
the parking for those residential units above is underground. So if you ever went behind there, you'd see that it does go downhill. It used to be the CAM redemption space. So people can get creative. I think what you have to understand is we have to provide this zoning, right, for this. Doesn't mean it's going to be built. Doesn't mean there's developers lining up to build it, because it's going to be very expensive.
Right.
Building costs are extremely expensive now.
Yep.
Even after COVID. But we're allowing it, we're showing this is the zone. The whole thought behind all of this type of zoning and, you know, in the last several years was, especially if you're near a train. So if we're in Beverly, downtown Beverly, or Ipswich, or Salem, the idea is, well, the millennials will come, and maybe there'll be a couple, but they're going to be jumping on the train. Maybe they only need 1 car, even if they couple up, right?
Agreed.
They reduce to 1. Or
But we
maybe
don't
you
have
have
that
a
here.
retired couple that isn't working, they're going to come move downtown, so they don't have to go, you know, they don't need the 2 cars, they're going to take advantage of the stores and so on downtown. That's kind of the idea and the thought process behind
Okay.
the reduction of all these cars, right? So that the idea is less cars, more public transit, more rail trails, more walking. That's kind of the idea, especially with the mass transit.
Okay. So just to reflect back, could we get clarity on that 3-point value and the 4-point something value?
Yeah.
And how that, does the number go up to the next level? So if you're at 4 plus or 5 plus or 3 plus or 4 plus, does that mean that we can put that extra apartment or bedroom in or whatever?
So Josh can speak to this as well, but from my experience, any community you work in, you're working with density numbers all the time. At 0.5, it goes up to the other unit. That's typically how it goes. However, we can change, we can, as long as we enumerate exactly what we want, we could say if it gets to 0.7, then it's a rounding. I mean, we can write that into the bylaw. If people care about that, or if they feel there's value in it. Again, we're talking the difference. You're talking about parking, and I think that's that was the basis of the question. And I think to the chair's point, it's that, if you want to have 3 cars, downtown might not be for you. Like that's like a harsh reality. That's just like, you know what, it might, that's not essentially what it's going to provide. It's not going to provide endless parking for people. It's going to provide parking that's essentially 1 or 2 for that purpose. So you have a downsizing couple, or you have a downsizing senior that's going into a 2-bedroom. They're only going to have 1 car. Young families, but the idea is that's what's happening. Yeah.
If you would approach the mic.
Nova Samade, town meeting member, precinct 1. I have no problem with the tweaks. I'm all for it, so I'm fine with that. But I'm curious about the trade-off between commercial space on the bottom and more units, or it would be more units overall in the building. Would we limit that for, like, if you have a 10-unit building, then you can put commercial, or would it be like, even if you have 3 units, you can put, like, is it gonna be the bylaw that specific, or just if you want commercial, you can have commercial? Okay.
So, yeah, the bylaw or the law is not that restrictive. It's basically just saying, if someone wants to put in commercial, they certainly can, number 1. Number 2, you actually get a density bonus. If you're doing a mixed-use building, if you're doing a commercial on the first floor and residential above, will allow you to essentially put more units in there if you put commercial on the first floor. But if you decide to put residential only, the only thing we're saying and that we're forced to do is that it has to be 15 units per acre. It used to be around, higher than that in some areas of downtown. The lowest, I think, was 12. So the idea is, like, again, still we're talking about tweaks, but that's all it's saying, is that if you're going to do residential only, you have to have this minimum. But if you want to put commercial in there, great. But we're incentivizing it now through a higher density, if that makes sense.
Other questions in the back, sir?
Pete Clement, town meeting member, precinct 3. There's a couple of things that I don't get a spark on this, and the reason being is this what we're trying to do? The end result, is this what we're trying to do? I'm asking you as the chair. To have that kind of situation going on, so everybody flocks to the town and the rest of that. Is that what we're looking for?
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to meet the zoning requirement. We need to show that the zoning is available. Doesn't mean we or anyone has to build it.
Right.
According to the law, you just have to have the necessary zoning in place so that it could be built. Does that mean that, obviously, I think that was probably a 4th of July or some type of event, where people are not driving down the street, they're having a party in the street. But I think the point is that you're trying to attract people to move and live and work downtown. That's kind of the thought, where a lot of times you end up in some towns when the economy's not good, you end up with 17 nail salons. Not that there's anything wrong with nail salons, and 3 or 4 pawn shops and a lot of vacant buildings. You want to have a thriving downtown, and that helps your tax base as well as, provide some opportunities for housing downtown.
All right, the reason why I'm asking, all right, is there's a couple of things that I see here as a problem. For one, the town of Danvers, I don't believe owns anything in the town anymore. All right, no fire station, no nothing. For that size of crowd, don't you need some kind of facilities? So if we're gonna have all these people flocking to the town with dances or whatever else you're gonna have going, they're gonna try to go into restaurants or whatever and use the facilities, and you don't have that. So, if this is what you're looking for, as Bill would say, there's other things that you gotta come up with before you can do any of this, for one. For the other thing is have you driven around town lately? You want people to go to town, they got all the lights off. The whole town, if you go up the streets or whatever, they got the lights dimmed down, all right? There's nothing there to draw people. The reason being is because it's so dark and dank and everything else, Take a ride downtown on your way home tonight, folks, and that ain't the town that I grew up in. There was always bright lights and everything else. Take a look from High Street, from the Port Corner all the way up High Street. You can barely see the road. And that ain't because I'm old. I mean, these lights that they got in town, you're not creating an atmosphere for people to go anywhere. And if this is all for the MBTA, what is Hamilton, Wenham, Topsfield doing? I mean, are they doing any of this?
Every town in the Commonwealth has to comply with this bylaw by 2024.
Not every town in Mass, but like Eastern Mass or like close to MBTA. But it's like 183. Yeah.
I mean, do they? So every city and town has to do this?
101.
All right. The reason why I'm asking is because the last time that I was here, I heard that this is great because we can go in for all kinds of benefits, all kinds of things that we can put in for. Well, like Beverly just did some of this, to keep, for the federal government or whatever, and they got all these stupid bump outs. This is New England. You got to plow snow. You can't have every time that you go in for a federal grant, there's certain rules and regulations that you got to have. All right, and Beverly did it, and they got these bump outs now. Salem did the same thing on Congress Street and Canal Street, and they got these bump outs. How do you plow snow? I mean, we're ahead of everybody because we got nice streets with nice curbs and everything else that we don't have to worry about a plow driver going through the windshield on. Really think about this thing before you guys want to go out and get your grants and whatever else. But, like I said, turn on the lights. The town looked good when I was a kid. It doesn't look good anymore. Turn up the lights.
Mr. Griffith?
Ryan Griffiths, Precinct 6. I just wanted to comment that I drove through High Street on my way here tonight. It was not dank or anything. It was a very nice area of town, and I can understand why these changes are being made to comply with the law because we are adjacent to an MBTA community. I think that the planning board is doing a good job, and I understand they want to make improvements in downtown, so there's been a lot of negative comments tonight. I just want to come up and say thank you for all your hard work and the planning department. I know everyone's not going to be satisfied with these changes, but town's doing their best to make the community more inclusive, better for everybody. So thank you. I want to come here and be a little positive tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the board? Oh, all right, sir. Before we go back to the board.
Bill McKenzie, 34 Harbor Street. If a developer wanted to put a parking garage in any of these zones, is that allowed?
I believe so. I'd have to look. Yes. I think it might need a special permit from the planning board, but I believe so, yes.
So if a developer wanted to do that and then charge people to park, like they do in the bigger cities? Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else from the audience? Members of the board, Tori, questions, comments?
I have a question for Brian. So we've talked before about improvements to the downtown. We've heard some about that tonight. So some of the funding opportunities that we would be locking ourselves out of if we chose not to comply, those, would some of those possibly be funding opportunities that could help us improve the downtown?
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. So one would certainly be a corridor study or an area plan specifically for the area. To the point about the lights, we actually, so the electrical division, DPW, planning, manager's office are getting together a schedule because you might have noticed downtown there's a lot of these strips of pavement. There's a lot of work being done downtown, and the idea is that we want to have everything kind of done over the next 2.5 years in terms of sidewalks, lights, all of that. And there will be a plan coming out very soon in terms of the timeline from the manager's office about that. But yes, there's certainly, and to be fair, there's other funding that we could get as well. The funding that would be through the state is the bigger dollar amounts that we frankly haven't gotten recently.
But we would be preventing the future opportunity to get those funds if we chose not to comply with this law.
Yeah, of course. The largest funds that are at our disposal would be not. We wouldn't have access to them.
Thanks.
Okay. Jean, questions, comments?
There's been a lot of discussion about the parking tonight. Like you said, I think if people are looking to live in the downtown and they know what they're getting into before they sign a lease or move in, they know how many parking spaces they're going to get. And if that works for their lifestyle, then they're going to move in. And if it doesn't, then they're not going to go there. And if a developer sees that they're not getting people moving in because of the parking, then they'll find another way to provide parking for people. I don't know. Has there been a parking study lately in the town, or is that something that can happen?
2015. So I don't know. Lately, it might not be the word, but
And even now, there's a lot of people are working from home because of COVID. I know before I had kids, I was one of those people that was a one-car family, and it worked for me, and I'm sure it works for other people. But yeah, good discussion tonight, and thank you for the positive comment. We're trying to do our best, and that's why we have these meetings.
Thank you. Michael, any comments, questions?
none at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone online? I know we have a few people that are online. If they have a comment, you could voice it. Or question at this point? Hearing none, I'll let Brian continue with his presentation. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, so I guess this is where I left off from the previous one. So in terms of where we are now, so we've achieved interim compliance. So this is during this 2-year period where we can still apply for grants, and we're still compliant with the law. That was reviewed. The action plan was approved back in January of this year. Now during this time is when we're trying to gather more feedback, what other changes we would need to do to make it compliant. Part of the requirement, our affordability requirements, they're not just in the downtown, it's the whole town. There's just essentially one bylaw that governs the affordability requirements. For projects that are larger than 10 units, anywhere in town, it has nothing to do with the fact that it's downtown, but it's part of this, so that's why the state cares. If any part of it is, you require more than 10% of deed-restricted units, you have to do an economic feasibility analysis. So we had to hire a consultant, because if you do more than 10 units anywhere in town, you have to provide 12.5% of the units to be deed-restricted affordable. So because of that, because it's more than 10%, we were required to perform an economic feasibility analysis, which basically looks at the downtown actual zoning, looks at the actual parcels, and says, is this economically viable using this affordability requirement? And that came back this week. It was complete. The final draft is going to be posted. It is compliant with the sorry. It is economically feasible. Our bylaw is compliant with the economic feasibility analysis that was performed by our consultant. And like I said, I'll post that this week so everyone can look at it. And so in terms of where we are, so it's we're going to finalize these draft articles for town meeting, changing the law. We would then review with town council after there's any more changes between now and over the next couple of weeks. And make final edits based on feedback between now and into December. November 28th is the actual zoning hearing for not just this article, but the other two articles that are in front of town meeting for zoning, for the zoning bylaw. So that's November 28th. We've actually already sent, so we sent our draft bylaw to the state. The goal is to have them say, yes, this is 100% compliant before we go to town meeting in February, so that we kind of already can go to town meeting saying that we don't have to ask to ask if it's actually compliant. That they required 3 months of time to review that. So the state is reviewing the changes as we speak. Again, November 28th, we have our public hearing for everything zoning related. And then hopefully town meeting adopts these zoning changes February 5th of next year. I was going to ask if anyone had any additional information that you would like that we could potentially put up on the website, or otherwise any homework for us. That was kind of how I was going to leave it for the night. But if anyone had any questions that either weren't answered, I am going to, everything's going to go on the planning the planning board page. So I'm going to have the PowerPoint, I'll have, and then the economic feasibility analysis as well. So if anyone has any, again, either questions or requests for information so that we can get you what you need, the floor is open.
Mr. Zubrick?
Thank you. I think the only thing I would like to see is how many of the 101 communities that need to comply with this law are actually complying, or have they rezoned their properties? Because there are 351 communities in this state, and 101 are involved in this, and they're involved in this only because of this MBTA compliance law that has been passed. And we don't have any MBTA in our town, at least in the last few years. But how many communities have complied and how they have complied? Because that's an important factor, because 101, are we one of the 101 that are complying, or is there 50-50 split?
So there are a couple of deadlines that happened at the state. To achieve interim compliance, all but 3 communities achieved interim compliance. So 98 communities 98 communities are compliant now out of the 101. All I know is that, 3 are not compliant. Maybe there's 102, don't quote me on that, but I know that 3 are not compliant. 2 have said that they have no interest in complying, and it's unclear how that's going to end. 1 actually is compliant right now. There's only 1 community that's actually legitimately compliant. They passed it at town meeting a few weeks ago, which is the town of Lexington. So they're the first. Not that that means anything, but in terms of who has actually complied, there's one community that's complied with the full bylaw, but 97% of every other, the community, 98 out of 101, have achieved interim compliance, which basically says we are going to comply, and this is how we are going to comply. So, yeah, that's the information that we have right now.
Further questions? Mr. Betancourt?
Tony Betancourt, Precinct 5. On affordability, right, basically, I know you can't take care of that, town can't because it's a private thing, but how's anybody going to afford to live downtown? If you're retired and you're making like if you're getting $2,000 a month and the apartment's $2,400, say.
No, there is definitely affordable requirements for any units that are built that exceed
Right, what do you
6
mean
units.
affordable? Is the state going to give them money or
Five.
something?
Any units. So Josh can kind of run down that with you real quick.
Sure. It's just there's a table, just how many net new units you're producing, but basically by the 6th unit, you have to provide an affordable unit.
And what's affordable mean, though?
I mean, it's defined by the feds, I believe. It's just it's not based on like a town scale. It's based on the housing prices of the entire Metro Boston. And every year the federal government comes up with a figure for, how much housing is Metro Boston, and then depending on how many units are, how much, the number of units, it comes up with what's affordable. So where we sit, we don't dictate those numbers. Unfortunately, we would want them to be lower also, but there is an affordable component for any project downtown and even throughout the town. So
We're just talking like one, with the Maple Street project, what are you talking, maybe 2 or 3 units maybe?
no, significantly higher, 29.
29 units.
Yep, that was part of a
29 people get a reduced rate, basically.
So
Exactly.
Those could be the ones that only have one car.
that was because it was in the 4-yard district. It had a 20% affordable piece. So
That's what I'm trying to say. I mean,
Yeah.
the reason being, we're getting priced out of this town. I mean, really, we have to. It's a beautiful town. We know that. I mean, I've been here for 45 years, and there's been a lot of changes, but I don't know if the changes are going the right way or the wrong way. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I just know that everything keeps increasing and people can't afford to live here anymore. I'll be honest with you.
Mr. Bates, I think you have the last word. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. Just kidding, Bill.
Again, Bill Bates, Precinct 4 Town Meeting Member. I want to talk about the affordability. I think that's part of what we're trying to get at by doing some of these things. We won't know till these units are built what the market will bear. And, if you get your back up and you start saying, I want 2 parking spots instead of 1.5, you're going to reduce the affordability of these places. So I think, and the other thing I want to say is, I'm tired of we are the United States of America. We have a federal government, a state government, and a local government. And they're all worthy of our respect. And for people to be sitting there saying, it's all about the money, we don't want to have to say no to the state, we have a responsibility to be part of the process. I'm proud of that process. I'm proud to be in the United States of America. And stop talking about, whether we need to comply with the state regulations to be able to even apply for these grants. Let's give them a chance and let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I think we'll go to the next part of the meeting, which is a brief summary of housekeeping zoning amendments for the upcoming special town meeting, tentatively scheduled for February 5th.
do you want me to?
Sorry, just a second.
I'm not sure.
Okay. So I'm not going to go through every single change. We're going to try to kind of talk about a summary. So there are a lot of sections that this is touching, this housekeeping article. The two main things that this housekeeping article is doing is trying to reflect state and relevant case law, and also for the bylaw to be as consistent with itself as possible. Over the years, you make small changes to zoning bylaws, and then there's a lot of incongruency throughout time. So we contracted with a zoning attorney who writes legislation as his main part of his job. And we would worked with him over the course of several months. He will actually be at town meeting for further questions. At the time, he wasn't able to make it tonight. So a lot of what this housekeeping article touches, like I said, is being consistent with itself. I'm not going to go through 45 pages of, it's not actually 45 pages of changes. It's just when you track changes in the edits, it balloons to a very large amount. This is going to be it's going to be covered in much more depth at the November 28th actually zoning hearing. Tonight was the main reason was for MBTA. But a lot of what it covers is offering protections for non-conforming structures and uses. The goal for all of these changes was really not to do any policy change. That was not the idea here at all. But basically allowing the main thing that I can say about this house scheme that I can talk very quickly about is that there's something that the zoning board, a term that it uses called a finding, as an actual decision. This is quite antiquated. You actually use findings to determine special permits and variances or site plan review, for example. So like these types of things is things that have just been in Danvers forever, 30, 40 years. Not that that's forever, but on the books, that's forever. That are just, again, antiquated. It's not actually the term that's used at the state level or even in other legal practice. So that's like most of these housekeeping changes. We're going to have a lot more opportunity again at the November 28th meeting. The next kind of article, or the next article, is adaptive reuse. And Jim, I'm going to put it up here, but I think you might have a little bit more clarity on what's going on with the adaptive reuse bylaw if you wanted to chime in.
Let me just find it here. Hold on.
Yep.
Okay, one second here. Yeah,
So it's a very short bylaw. It's only 2 pages, and it offers flexibility essentially for reusing buildings rather than trying to tear them down. So it's trying to incentivize the reuse of older buildings. The main change, I think, from the last time was that it didn't allow you to apply for some type of a special permit to do a use that wasn't allowed in the zone. Where in other places in town, if you can't do you can do something by special permit, why shouldn't you be able to do it there? So that was the major change. If anyone was around here last year for the adaptive reuse, that was the major change as far as I know. But Jim, if you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, so actually, I'm on this, at the last annual town meeting, we had the selectmen moved this article to go to a committee, and I am on the committee with Lou George is also on the board, but he's on there in his capacity as a a preservation committee member, and we have members from the finance committee, the zoning board of appeals, and we've been meeting. We've had several meetings with town staff and the town archivist and so on. Not only in the adaptive reuse part of it, because I think when this came in front of us a couple of years ago, we felt that it was a little bit rushed and that it needed more study. It was with about a dozen other articles, so there was a lot of concern over the property on Summer Street and the saving of that property next to the nursing home. So that was a big push, but after further study over the last several months, this new appointed board has looked at this zoning bylaw along with Historic District Commission and how we look at and how we treat the preservation of buildings and just trying to improve upon the legislation. So that's going to come out at the next meeting. And they're having another meeting on the 30th, which will be actually 2 days after this meeting, next meeting for this board. That's going to further kind of give a final version of what is being proposed coming from that committee. And Aaron has been working with Josh on that as well, and also town staff, including the building inspector. So that's still being firmed up, but we've pretty much come a long way on improving those zoning bylaws. And as was mentioned by Brian, this legislation is to try to encourage the reuse of historic buildings and not the tearing down of those buildings, to really explore that, and also to look into, see if there is any funding that could be obtained to help with that, and to kind of lay out a procedure for that. So not to take away from the Preservation Commission or the Historic District Commission, but to work in complement with them. So that's what you'll be seeing in the next couple of weeks. So, thank you.
That's all I got.
Any further questions from the audience? For anyone at home? Board members? Nope. Tori? All right, Josh?
No, all the documentation's in the packet. So to the board, recommend, just looking that over the next couple of weeks. Like Brian mentioned, we'll dive into it probably, we'll dive into it a little bit more at our next meeting. There's essentially how we view it, like three kind of buckets, main buckets. It's the MBTA, the housekeeping, and then the adaptive reuse. So I think that's how we're kind of looking at it.
Great. And for those, I appreciate those town meeting members coming out this evening. I appreciate your service to the town and being here, and it's most of you that are here and always here. So I appreciate you doing that and being an advocate for your precincts and coming out. So our next meeting, we're going to start at 6:30, because we do have a very important meeting following. I think we're dedicating maybe a couple hours or thereabouts for reviewing this stuff and passing it on in the public meeting. And then we have an applicant for the Denny site who's been before us a couple times already. So we may be going to a decision on that, which is a very important part of the town being redeveloped. So you're obviously welcome to stay for that. But do you see that as a timetable?
Yeah.
Because I know we wanted to start earlier to get this done.
Right. I think.
And then they have a big, kind of a finishing presentation. They've been in front of us twice already. But.
Sure. At least for the zoning amendment piece, I don't think we have to have like a definitive, time frame, but maybe an hour and a half might be.
Yeah. Did we tell them to come at 8 or?
We can.
Or 7:30?
Yeah. We could definitely do that. We definitely, I think, want to just start with the zoning amendment piece, just because the public.
Mm-hmm.
The public component, and obviously the residents who wanted to participate wouldn't want to have to sit through, you know, an application of that for that length. So I think we certainly are going to start that night with the zoning amendments and then conclude with that second item.
So can you just review the process again? So this is the third public, this will be the third public meeting, and
So-
then we're going to pass it off to FinCom?
So what we've done so far has been actually sort of just like informal public feedback. But at the November 28th is actually the official public hearing for the zoning amendments. So I think how we view it is that, I guess we'll get a feel for it on the 28th. But at least the 28th, at least the regularly scheduled meeting on December 10th or 12th, we would, primarily, have a decent, robust conversation about the zoning amendments. We ultimately, we'll have to give a recommendation to town meeting, but that's probably more in January, maybe the early January meeting, but we haven't discussed that too far out. But so November, December, focused on the zoning, those three articles. So.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Were there minutes?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, thank you. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I gotta go back in the meeting, we gotta do the minutes. My bad.
Yep.
We're gonna reopen just to accept some minutes. Let's see. Yeah, do you want to
Thank you very much.
make a motion? Yeah. Is it, yeah, we gotta go to a vote on that for people who are here. Go ahead. We just have one quick item. If you could just be quiet for a second, we have one item before we close. We forgot to accept the minutes.
I move that we accept the minutes for the meeting of October 24th of 2023.
A second.
Motion been made and second, and all the members who are here were present. So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you. All right, we're going to adjourn again.
Yeah, do it.
As voted earlier. Thank you.
Should we do another motion to adjourn, or?
Yes.
Oh.
It was unanimous.
Okay.
All right. All right, no problem. Thanks for coming.